So moving on, Cheryl Twomey says, woot. Woot back. Cheryl, good to see you. Bill, today is my first anniversary as a Stratosphere Lounge. Let's hear it for Cheryl, ladies and gentlemen. Look at that. Oh, you can't see it, Cheryl, but the applause meter over here is just going nuts. Well, it'll go nuts in 7 seconds when the message gets out to you guys, because I'm 15 seconds ahead of the time. But happy first anniversary and happy birthday to Cheryl for being a Stratosphere Lounger and produces a lot of questions, and she's been great on the Facebook page. So congratulations. I thank you so much for everything I've learned from you in the past 12 months. It's been a wild ride. Thank you very much for all the things I learned from you, fine people. Here's my question. Are we living in Bizarro world? We as a nation are making excuses for the very ideology that wants to strike ours from the face of the earth. Their atrocities are overlooked in favor of social acceptance. Why are we shaking hands with the devil? Well, we're shaking hands with the devil, I think, and I'm not going to re-answer 2 questions that I just spent 47 minutes answering. But we're shaking hands with the devil, Cheryl. Here come all the yahoos, and congratulations, Cheryl, up there. You'd be pleased to know. We're shaking hands with the devil for the 2 reasons that we talked about earlier. We're shaking hands with the devil because we assume that by calling them a religion of peace and by saying we're not at war with Islam, we're not at war with the middle, we're just at war with terrorists, that would keep the middle from being radicalized. That's one reason we're shaking hands with the devil. I think that has been of limited success. And the other reason we're shaking hands with the devil is because of the social proof, because of the power of what I just described, the power that they have over you for not wanting to admit that you're the last person on earth who can't see the clothes, or you're the last person on earth who believes in the Second Amendment, or you're the last person on earth who thought that Ronald Reagan was a great president. They tell you all the time that the values you hold are the values of dinosaurs. We're progressive. We've progressed beyond where you were. We're further along than you were. We used to think like you, but then we got smarter. And this is why we do it. This is why we agree to things that are completely inverted. This is why our children are such little demons now. In the space of a year, I've gone from thinking of the snowflake generation as being incredibly, unbelievably weak to refining my position about them. They are spectacularly weak and fragile, but more and more every day I realize that they had a word for it, and the word is spoiled. You would spoil your child. That's the perfect word. They're not only spectacularly fragile and weak, they're becoming almost unimaginably vicious and mean because they've never been confronted. They've never had a bad moment, never had a bad thought. And when a teacher or somebody like Ben Shapiro or whatever goes to tell them that there are other viewpoints than yours, then they want you to go away. And more often than not, these little monsters want you to go away violently because you've given them a little amygdala stimulation, and they don't like the sound of it. They don't like being disagreed with. They don't like being disagreed with because they have no self-respect. They've had self-respect crammed into them from birth, but they've never generated their own, so they don't know what it is. So they react violently. Just a half hour before we started recording this, I saw the link to the article on Ben Shapiro, who went down there to San Diego, I think it was, and basically said, listen, there's another way of looking at these things. Well, income inequality and so on and so on. And somebody said, well, what about poor people? And Ben basically said, look, poor people are poor if you're poor over the course of your life, it's because not because you were born into some disadvantaged class. He said it's because you suck with money, which is true. And of course, then the teacher says, no, I think you may have crossed a line here. There are people here from low-income families. And a couple kids start hyperventilating, and then the teacher says, I'm going to clear the class. If you don't want to stay any longer, you may leave now. And large numbers of the students get up to leave, and as they reported in the article, most of them wanted to leave because you don't have to sit through the damn class anymore, right? But some stayed. But then basically the teacher said, my primary job is to protect my students. Protect them. Not from a man with a gun, but protect them with a guy with a different idea of how the world works. Have to protect my students from this idea. And the idea wasn't line everybody up against the wall and shoot them. The idea was, no, if you've been poor all your life, you do not understand how to handle money because you can, in fact, lift yourself out of poverty through hard work, and you don't have to be super smart to do it. But there are some things you have to do, and these things are pretty simple, You get married and you have kids after you're married and you get a high school degree. No one in this country statistically, you can find a few individuals, but statistically, if you are married to somebody, you marry and you have the kids after the marriage and both of you have high school degrees, then you will not be poor in America. You will not be poor. You might be lower middle class, but you will find a way to get along. And Ben Shapiro just went down there and said that, and the kid started hyperventilating, and the teacher basically threw himself between his classroom and the incoming bullets of differing opinions. And he thinks that he's protecting his students, but what he's really doing is he's committing child abuse. He's abusing his students by simply saying that by somebody who has a different opinion and maybe something that maybe you didn't agree with, or maybe something that hurt your feelings, we're going to stop this right now. That's child abuse. All of it's child abuse. All of this snowflake generation is child abuse. You know, you wouldn't say to a child, although we may be getting close to this point, if you had a middle school kid who's 15, right, or whatever, let's just say they're 15, and this teacher says, no, that's it, that's enough discomfort for this child. I'm going to interpose now and say that this child doesn't have to listen to you anymore. I'm protecting my students. And to me, that's pretty much precisely the same as saying, I've got all these kids here and none of them know how to walk. They're not genetically crippled. It's just that they've been, every time they started crying as a baby, we picked them up and moved them and put them in another chair. And when it's time for them to go to a new class, well, we pick them up and we take them to the new class just out of loving concern. And if you had this entire classroom full of kids whose legs were atrophied as badly as their emotions and their minds are atrophied, and their souls too for that matter, you wouldn't call that protecting your children. You'd call it child abuse. If you took a kid from age of birth and made sure that they never had to walk from point A to point B, that you carried them everywhere out of a deep love for them, if you simply carried them everywhere to the point where they can't stand on their own two legs, let alone walk, then you really did this in a basement someplace, and you said, no, is your child crippled? No, my child's fine. He's just never walked because I never wanted him to go through the pain of falling down. And you've got a kid with these little twigs where his legs should be. You wouldn't be praised for that. You wouldn't be mom of the year for that. You would be put in jail for child abuse if you would not let your child walk from one place to another. And that's what these teachers do. It's not protecting the children. It's destroying them. And, you know, there you go. So look, the world is upside down because the progressives need a world that's upside down for their ideas to be introduced. It's not going to make them work. But in order for people to accept them without rioting in the streets, in order for people to accept this progressive socialist world of equality of result rather than equality of opportunity, the world has to be upside down. It has to be upside down. That's why so many people, you know, in science, most scientists are very, very liberal. And most actors are very, very liberal. And the reason I think that actors and scientists both can be very, very liberal and progressive is because there's no cost for failure in acting or raw science. Matter of fact, in science, if you construct a hypothesis and it proves not to work, you've learned something. You've actually achieved something. This does not explain what we're observing, so now we have to try something new. If you can lock out a theory, that's an achievement for science. If there's a robust theory that presumably explains a lot of things, and you can come up with experiments that show it's not true, you've achieved something in science. You've basically failed up. And in show business, the more vile you are, the more contemptible you are as a person, the more press you get. The more press you get, the more people come to see your movies. You fail upwards in science when you don't prove a theory, and you fail upwards in the entertainment business when you increase your dollar value by reprehensible behavior that makes people fascinated you. However, in aviation and engineering, when you fail, people die. There's no way to sugarcoat it. You fail badly enough in engineering, or you fail badly enough in aviation, and you or other people or both are going to die. The consequences for failure in aviation and engineering are severe. And so your ability to read what reality actually is rather than what you think it would be is selected among pilots and engineers. And you may think that a bridge would look more beautiful if it were thinner, and you may think that the bridge would be more aesthetic and people may want to run, and your reputation as an architect may be enormously enhanced by reducing the structure on that bridge to something absolutely slender. But if you reduce it to the point where it's no longer structurally sound and it goes down in a breeze and people are killed, you don't have a good career as an engineer ahead of you. Likewise, if you are, if you're the kind of person who simply can't take direction, and you get an air traffic control instruction, or you're told to pre-flight your airplane, and you think, I'm Kim Kardashian, or I'm Kanye West. What do I need to pre-flight my airplane for? I'm Kanye West. I'm Jesus. Everybody worships me. Then off you go, and then down you go, and that's what killed John Kennedy, by the way. John Kennedy is not the only person who's ever made this distinction, but John Kennedy flew into conditions that he knew were marginal. He thought, well, I've got a part of an instrument rating, so we'll go and we'll look. I have to be there. I absolutely have to be there. We're late, so I'm going to miss the wedding if we don't go. So John Kennedy takes off into marginal conditions, which rapidly deteriorate into instrument conditions, and John Kennedy doesn't have an instrument rating. So why did John Kennedy take off into instrument conditions when he didn't have an instrument rating? He's John Kennedy. He's John. John gets everything he wants. John is the prince of the nation. John gets every girl he's ever looked at. John has millions and millions of dollars. John wants to start some magazine. People love the magazine. John wants to wear clothes. Everybody wants to give him the clothes for free. How's a guy like that going to say no? So in science, you can fail and be rewarded. In entertainment, you can fail and be rewarded. In engineering, you can fail, lose your job, go to jail, or maybe be killed. And in aviation, if you fail strongly enough, you're going to die, and your innocent passengers are going to die too. So that's why the world's upside down, Cheryl. The world's upside down because it's run by actors and idiots. It's run by politicians who have no price to pay for failure. If this world were run by pilots and engineers and policemen, let's say, soldiers are a great example. Why do you think that great numbers of the military, actually pretty liberal, large numbers of the military voted for Barack Obama, but when you get down to the special forces guys and you get down to the combat infantrymen and the fighter pilots, they're conservative to a person. Why? Because, certainly no disrespect by this. If you're in the rear, if you're loading bombs, or if you're a cook, or again, I do not mean to disrespect these occupations. Can't have a military without them. But in those positions, if you're wrong about reality, it's not going to kill you. When your ability to assess threat and risk and reward is a life or death selection that you're subjected to many, many, many times, then all of a sudden you no longer have the option of ignoring reality. And once you have to be beholden to reality or die, suddenly you start voting more conservative. Funny how that works, isn't it?